In the early months of 2025, financial crimes detectives in New South Wales began investigating an unusual pattern in vehicle thefts across Sydney. What they uncovered would reveal a disturbing evolution in Australian organised crime, a marketplace where murder contracts are traded like gig economy jobs, and teenagers willingly sign up to kill strangers for cash. The investigation started with stolen cars, not random thefts, but systematic acquisitions of vehicles that kept appearing at crime scenes across Sydney's southwest. These weren't ordinary getaway cars, they were what police would come to call kill cars. Stolen vehicles fitted with cloned number plates, pre-staged across the city, filled with jerry cans of petrol, face coverings, and in some cases, complete kidnapping kits containing sledgehammers, baseball bats, pillowcases, gloves, and gaffer tape. By June 2025, when Task Force Falcon was formed to address escalating violence between the Alameddine crime network and their former associates KVT, detectives had identified something entirely new. A group calling themselves G7, over 30 young men and teenagers, some as young as 15, operating as independent contractors for Sydney's underworld. G7 represents a fundamental shift in how organised crime operates. Traditional crime families operated on loyalty, family ties, and hierarchical structures. G7 has no such allegiances. They work for the highest bidder, and police allege they've been contracted by both sides of the Alameddine conflict simultaneously. Their clients include established crime syndicates and, in some cases, underworld figures who have fled Australia but continue orchestrating violence from overseas. Detective Superintendent Jason Box, who commands Task Force Falcon, describes what makes G7 unusual: their willingness to take on serious offences without a second thought. They're involved in every stage of contracted violence, staging vehicles before crimes, executing the crimes themselves, and planning post-offence escape routes and evidence destruction. Superintendent Peter Foe, commander of the Organised Crime Squad, characterises them as sitting at the lower end of the criminal food chain but bearing equal responsibility. They have no knowledge of or relationship to their intended victims. They're willing to get paid to coordinate and facilitate resources, staged kill cars, weapons, surveillance, on behalf of organised crime groups who then carry out or commission acts of violence. Police allege G7 supplied 17 of the 53 kill cars seized by Task Force Falcon. These vehicles, stolen from suburbs across Sydney, are strategically positioned throughout the city, ready for immediate deployment in shootings, kidnappings, and murders. The incidents linked to G7 reveal a disturbing disregard for innocent life. In March 2025, two 15-year-old boys allegedly connected to G7 fired 28 bullets into a Maryland's home. Inside were a mother and her 4 children. The bullets missed the family by centimetres. Weeks later, the same teenagers allegedly targeted a Guildford West home, again narrowly missing the occupants. These weren't isolated incidents. Task Force Falcon has connected G7 members to multiple contracted shootings, targeting homes linked to underworld figures. The pattern is consistent. Young contractors with no personal stake in criminal conflicts, willing to spray homes with bullets, regardless of who might be inside. The crackdown came in waves throughout 2025. The most dramatic series of arrests occurred in late July and early August. On Wednesday morning, Raptor Squad officers arrived at a Menai property. Video footage shows them knocking and identifying themselves before using a battering ram to break down the door, ignoring the "please take off your shoes" sign. Inside, they found nearly $30,000 in cash, over a kilogram of cocaine, a single-barrel shotgun with ammunition, and 14 mobile phones. 4 hours later, police stopped Blaze Collins in Narellan. Footage of the arrest shows at least 8 officers swarming his vehicle, dragging him out and pinning him to the ground as a police dog barks inches from his face. Collins, 21 years old, had the letters G and 7 tattooed prominently on his forearms. He was charged with possessing a shortened firearm, participating in a criminal group, and driving while his license was cancelled. Simultaneously, officers arrested Tyrese Paraku, also 21, while he was driving through Blacktown. He faced 7 charges, including possessing a shortened firearm, supplying a large commercial quantity of prohibited drugs, and dealing with proceeds of crime exceeding $5,000 but less than $100,000. An 18-year-old, Zane Perra, had been arrested days earlier at a correctional centre on the mid-north coast. His charges included participating in a criminal group, possessing an unauthorised firearm, and supplying a firearm to an unauthorised person. A 4th man received a court attendance notice for gun, criminal group, and driving offences. A separate operation on Thursday morning targeted alleged G7 members in Oran Park and Hinchinbrook. Police arrested 3 males aged 16, 18 and 21. They seized 5 kill cars, a firearm and ammunition, $41,000 in cash, GPS trackers, 37 mobile phones, and dedicated encrypted criminal communication devices. The vehicles contained jerry cans filled with petrol intended for burning the cars after use. By the time these articles were published, at least 13 alleged G7 members and associates had been arrested and were before the courts. Task Force Falcon had laid 280 charges against 121 individuals. G7 is part of a broader phenomenon that senior police have labelled Air Tasker for Crooks. Assistant Commissioner Scott Cook, commander of the State Crime Command, explains that contemporary organised crime networks are outsourcing violence to limit their liability and concentrate on Sydney's lucrative drug market. A marketplace exists online where contract criminals advertise their services for different types of crimes. These contracts are negotiated through encrypted apps. Payment is made in Bitcoin. Contractors use AirTags for surveillance and protect their residences with facial recognition technology. The underworld, Cook says, is leaps and bounds ahead of where it was 5 or 6 years ago. The most chilling example came on October 7th, 2025, though it wasn't connected to G7. Police intercepted 3 men allegedly hired by a Vietnamese crime syndicate called the Final Crime Family. The men had no organised crime links and no connection to their intended victim. They were allegedly en route to execute a man as he collected his children from a Revesby daycare centre. Police had been conducting covert surveillance for weeks, monitoring up to 15 stolen cars. In a tactical move, they replaced the contents of jerry cans, pre-filled with petrol, to ignite getaway vehicles with water. When officers moved in, they arrested all 3 men and charged them with attempted murder. Cook describes the operation as a comprehensively thought out and planned operation involving a balance of risk and evidence. Police will always fall on the side of community safety, even if it means burning evidence. The rise of contract criminals creates a specific danger that traditional organised crime did not. These contractors are often amateurs with no training, no experience, and no regard for collateral damage. They take contracts they cannot properly execute, making them vulnerable along with their families. Or they complete the contracts but kill the wrong person. Sydney plumber John Versace was shot dead in May 2025. Teen Luke Manasseh was ambushed and stabbed to death in July 2025. Investigators suspect both were murdered in cases of mistaken identity. Cook is direct about the problem. People have been killed because amateurs trying to be gangsters are simply getting it wrong. An attempted murder occurred in October 2025 on a Sydney street, with a toddler just meters away from the fatal shooting location. This represents the complete disregard for public safety that characterises the new model of contract violence. Cook identifies the fundamental driver of this violence, the astronomical amount of drugs entering Australia. Border control seizures of heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine and MDMA are at unprecedented levels. The profits from this drug trade are enormous, and criminals are willing to kill for them. Alongside drugs, significant quantities of cutting-edge firearms are being imported. Sydney's gangsters now have access to weapons that would have been unavailable 5 or 6 years ago. When firearms and drugs combine with advanced telecommunications technology, the result is an underworld operating at a level of sophistication unprecedented in Australian history. Another element transforms the landscape: the constant publication of violence online. Crime that once happened in darkness is now captured on CCTV and mobile phones, then shared across social media platforms. This creates a dual problem that Cook describes in detail. First, it frightens the community. Despite crime remaining at historically low levels, increased exposure to violent imagery creates fear disproportionate to actual risk. Second, and more dangerously, it desensitizes young people to violence. They watch streams of shootings, stabbings and murders. They begin to think they can be gangsters. They take contracts and attempt to execute people, numbed to what they're actually doing. The phenomenon has escalated from teenagers posting about stealing cars to content creation around the most serious crimes. Police are now seeing live streams of murders and attempted murders. The Min's government introduced post and boast legislation in 2024, outlawing bragging about crimes on social media, but the content continues. New South Wales Police have deployed multiple task forces to combat this evolution in organised crime. Task Force Falcon focuses on the Alameddine conflict and associated violence. Strike Force Flowdown investigates contract killings specifically. Strike Force Duncan originally examined vehicle supply chains to organised crime before its findings led to the discovery of G7. The Raptor Squad, known for aggressive tactical operations, has been instrumental in executing raids and arrests. Their methods, battering rams, multiple officers, police dogs, reflect the danger posed by heavily armed young criminals willing to use violence. Detective Superintendent Jason Box emphasises that detectives are working to identify the senior underworld figures commissioning these crimes. The arrests will continue, and police will make inroads into the higher levels of these networks in due course. G7 and the broader contract killing phenomenon represent organised crime adapting to modern technology and market economics. By outsourcing violence to independent contractors, established crime networks reduce their exposure to murder charges while maintaining the ability to eliminate rivals and intimidate competitors. For young men and teenagers in Sydney's southwest, this creates a perverse opportunity. With no prospects of entering traditional organised crime families, they can instead offer their services on encrypted platforms. The money is immediate, the victims are strangers. The technology makes it feel distant and impersonal. But as Cook notes, these young contractors need to be extremely careful about what they're doing. They're participating in serious crimes against serious criminals, and there's always the possibility of repercussions. They have the same blood on their hands as the people who carry out acts of violence, even if they only supplied the car or did the surveillance. The arrests of alleged G7 members throughout 2025 demonstrate police capacity to penetrate these networks. The seizure of 53 kill cars removes resources from the underworld. The 280 charges against 121 individuals suggest a broad net being cast across Sydney's criminal landscape. Yet the fundamental economics remain unchanged. Drugs continue entering Australia in astronomical quantities. Firearms follow the same routes, encrypted apps still function, Bitcoin still transfers, young people still watch violence online and convince themselves they can profit from crime without consequences. The question isn't whether police can arrest individual G7 members. Clearly they can, and clearly they will continue to do so. The question is whether the underlying conditions that created G7, the drug profits, the available weapons, the online marketplaces, the desensitization to violence, can be addressed before another group of teenagers decides to tattoo a number on their arms and start staging kill cars across Sydney. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. And as always, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you want more stories from the Australian underworld, please consider subscribing and liking this video. It really helps me out and helps the channel grow. Till next time, take care.